Or not.
It's probably close enough for government work.
Close, yeah.
This
is not government funded, but
it's not funded.
This isn't funded. This is like Riley funded. If anything.
If anything.
Biggest piece of equipment being the mixer or the recording interface or whatever you want to call it.
And somebody keeps buying alcohol. So
well,
somebody
also keeps produced by executive producer Riley.
No, you're not really the producer. You're the producer.
Yeah, that's true. Well, executive producer isn't really a producer. You're just the guy who buys everything. I think that's
and
how it works.
tells people what to do.
Yes,
and that is sort of what I do.
Yeah.
Don't bass boost us into oblivion.
Yeah,
are we bass boosted?
I like that sound.
He wants the NPR sound, and I'm like, no, it's just so inorganic. We don't sound like that.
I found a happy medium, I think, with the current setup.
A little bit of that is good, but it just sounded so overproduced.
Yeah,
and that's not something you want.
Fair. We'll roll with that.
But we just established you were the executive producer. And we don't want this to sound overproduced.
Can't be overachievers or anything like that.
I mean,
no. I don't base my sense of self-worth as a child around what my accomplishments were or anything.
I mean, you're assuming I had accomplishments to base my self-worth on.
I'm talking about myself here.
Oh.
Good and honest assessment.
You said that into an unplugged mic.
That's right.
So what?
You will never know what I said. All two of you in the audience.
That'll be a mystery for you to piece together through a long and complex...
Piece together the mystery.
A long and complex series.
An ARG we set up to learn what Riley said in that 2 seconds.
Complex mystery.
You have to get into the Palladian Papers' deep lore. Explore the wiki just to make sense of anything we're saying.
Imagine if we had our own wiki. We could make our own wiki.
We could, and it could be very amusing.
A reference wiki. For when we say a phrase.
That actually would be a terrible idea. Someone would have to go through and actually do it.
Yeah. But if somebody wants to, be our guest.
I'm sure one of the two of you has enough time on your hands.
Yeah. So if Riley says stragi noi, then you'll know exactly.
Siamo noi, draghi noi.
And so on.
In memoria degli antichi, siamo uniti tra di noi. Oddly enough, that's a bit of foreshadowing right there.
A little bit, yeah.
For the zero of you who get that reference, you'll understand. But for the rest of us, we're going to talk about
unless you watch Italian YouTubers.
Unless you watch Italian YouTubers who do...
as
content specialized around a particular game.
Yep.
That we may or may not be talking about today.
And we may or may not have talked about up until this point, almost the beginning of every episode. And yet, ironically,
the last couple.
Regardless, I feel like I'm coming to the end of my season 2 arc.
Wait, what?
That's always been something that I've never quite understood, is how podcasts have seasons.
Is that maybe just the way people choose to produce them?
It might be, but this is too big of a number. We're just gonna roll over now.
How?
Or just have the big numbers and show how long you've been around.
Right. It's
season 1, episode 400.
Then you have to know how long a season is. Either you have to have a consistent season duration, or you have to have everyone memorize how long a season is.
Well, that and
each of your individual ones are, rather.
Mm-hmm. If you want to take a break, then just queue up several episodes, and then while those are airing, take your break. It depends on your podcast and the sort of stuff you cover, I suppose. But yeah, the whole season structure doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either, because I don't know.
There are certain podcasts where it might make sense. Ones
Sure.
that are more storytelling based.
Sure.
Like, I could
Critical
see-
Role or something.
Or Mike Roll was like, that's how I heard it podcast.
That's not really like a,
It's pretty
anything
short.
with a thread of continuity to
No,
it,
that's
whole
true.
Episode over episode.
That's true. There was this podcast early on my dad used to listen to, where this guy was telling, stories about growing up or like different like life stories. He was kind of a good storyteller. It was kind of entertaining. That had like a season structure to it, and I don't really understand why. But it was like early podcasting days. I don't know how long it's been a thing, but it was like 2008, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So there was only a handful of people doing that sort of thing back then, and they thought it would. I think that people thought it would die out when stuff switched over to smartphones. But psych, we're not going anywhere.
It's never
It's
been
actually
bigger,
better.
Yeah,
and it's just exploding.
because the convenience. I think part of it too is the convenience of
You can't really watch YouTube videos at work, but you can listen to a podcast while you're at work.
because they'll play on other whitelisted platforms that you can.
Well,
listen to.
YouTube's white, like nothing's blacklisted at my work. Not even
Yeah.
Twitch is blacklisted. At my
I'm the only one in my office at my new job who isn't blacklisted on social media sites because I need to use them. And so that's kind of fun. My coworkers were bugging me because there was this address from the governor about something or other, and I was watching it because it was relevant to the type of work I do, about stuff for the fall. And and they were like, how come you can watch it on your computer and it's not even showing up on mine? I was like, oh, it might be because they're doing this through Facebook Live. It's like, that explains it. But yeah, I don't know. It's been kind of interesting being a working man again for almost a full work week after 3 months of squalor and
It's such a lonely and empty house without you here playing Minecraft.
making absolutely no noise whatsoever and building basically.
Acting as though I don't exist.
Yeah.
In my cupboard under the stairs.
Do you actually sit under the we have a cupboard under the stairs.
No, he doesn't get the reference.
Well, it's Harry Potter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, you could almost make it
why
into a
would
fun
I?
little nook.
If there weren't a bunch of junk in there.
True. Yeah, there's.
I actually might.
But I kind of miss it. But then it's like money's kind of nice.
Yeah, money.
So-
Yeah,
it
that
does
is.
tend to be a thing that.
Even
Little
if I
bit.
was picking up freelancing stuff here and there, it's gonna be interesting. The place I'm working, they've never had a marketing coordinator before, so I'm picking up a bunch of threads that were held by other people and bringing it all into one thing. So it's kind of interesting and like also an enormous awful mess that I have to sort out. But that's why they hired me. That's why I'm there. So
But man, that
What?
Bishop full domains for
Oh
Diocese of Fargo teens is a meme page we should really start.
yeah,
And just have the profile picture be that super zoomed in Bishop Fulda when he was meeting with Pope Francis. I gotta find that. I was gonna post it.
and it's not as if like we respect the heck out of Bishop. It's more out of like how cool he is that
He's
it's
just such a fun guy.
yeah, man. That video I found today was
Wait,
pure
is that
gold.
just like on the computer or
No,
what?
it was like on like there's this guy who does a lot of their videos, and they have like a fundraising like auction every year, and I think one of the years it was Star Wars themed, and somehow they got him to dress up as a Jedi.
They got our bishop to dress up as a Jedi
And it
and
was
stand
like the
against.
most-
Must have been like a green screen because there was like
Yeah.
the council chamber from
Yeah.
the prequels
Yeah.
as the background.
Yeah, it was. And this was like a clip. This was like a highlight reel of like, and then there's bloopers and different things in there too. And I was like, wait, where's the original video? I was trying to find it, but I was just like, what did he say? It was just so like, wait, what?
I love you. Show me like this 3-second clip, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, I was like, hold on. I rewound that little clip because that's how long the video clip was. I
Right.
rewound that like several times. Like, what how, who, why did, huh?
I love this.
This is my new favorite thing.
I love this.
This is my new favorite thing. And to think, like, I did a talent show comedy routine with Star Wars bits in it, and Bishop Folda was there. But this is also 4 years after whenever that was that he made the video, I think. Anyway, fun stuff.
Fun stuff.
What a bishop. Yeah. Stuff.
Speaking of fun stuff.
Speaking of fun stuff.
Speaking of what these guys call fun, we are the Palladian Papists. I am James.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Riley.
And plot twist, we are talking about Dark Souls this week.
Finally.
Just pretend
so you guys can stop having to hear about it every week.
Well,
I mean, we might continue to bring it up.
Yeah.
Until we do the next Dark Souls game, which
Press
will probably
X to
be
doubt
a while.
that this won't come up again.
Yeah, it'll be a bit before I get around to another one. I'll want to play through the first one.
We will more than likely do Dark Souls 3 at some point once I finish it. Bit.
I suppose because you haven't completed that playthrough yet, have you?
No.
And I might try and find a platform.
Is Dark
to
Souls
play
2
through
worth
on.
talking about?
Yes, but not outside of the context of Dark Souls 1.
Okay.
Neither is 3 for that matter.
Hmm.
The story of Dark Souls 2 is pretty brilliant, and we're going to touch on it here and there today,
Sure.
because there's... Yeah, we'll get into that.
All right. Well, where do we want to start?
Well, I think we want to start at the beginning.
And in the beginning,
And in the beginning, as far as we know, there were... The world as it was known was basically just gray. Everything was unchanging. There was no disparity. There were dragons with stone scales that lived forever.
and like a bunch of rocks and,
And
stone
a bunch of
trees.
trees.
And
There were
stuff.
arch trees that were just gray trees, and the sky was gray, and the ground was gray, and everything
Because
was
this
gray.
is mid-2000s, and that's how video games looked.
It was the early 2010s.
Yeah.
But none of that is actually appears in the game because the first flame appeared.
Oh.
And the first flame brought with it disparity. So there was light and dark, heat and cold, life and death where there wasn't before. Everything was mediocre.
What is this newfound complexity?
Everything was unchanging before, but fire brought with it disparity and change. And in the first flame, there were these 4 great souls. The first was, well, these aren't in any particular order, but in the cutscene in the opening, the first one we see is Nito, who is the
How's that
first
spelled?
N-I-T-O.
Yeah, that's what I
Nito.
thought.
Not N-E-A-T-O. Nito. And he is like...
I was the first guy who ever died. Neat.
It's like a Pokemon.
Except
like
he
Nito.
wasn't. He was just... He found a soul, and that magically turned him into a skeleton blob.
Because
Oh,
that's
cool.
what souls do.
That's what souls do.
Yes.
But then there was the Witch of Izalith, who was good at doing fire. There was Gwyn, who was the Lord of Sunlight. And the furtive pygmy, so easily forgotten.
I mean,
He
I
is
didn't-
intended to be easily forgotten.
Yes.
And most people do, in fact, easily forget him and don't even realize that he exists. Because you don't run into him for a while.
Not directly.
You do in the DLC, but we'll get there. So with these 4 great souls and the newfound powers that accompanied them, these great lords challenged the dragons. And they were able to defeat them by using their particular talents to remove the things about the dragons that made them immortal, namely their scales.
With a little help from a jealous, scaleless dragon who
Yes,
was
there
like,
was
why do
one-
you guys get to be immortal?
There was one scaleless dragon, and of course the scales are the things that make them immortal. So he didn't have them, and he was jealous.
Gimme.
So he betrayed all of his dragon brethren and helped the lords kill all of the dragons. And thus that began the Age of Fire, which Gwyn was effectively the ruler over.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Age of Fire, all of these beings that were born of fire were very powerful, like the Witch of Izalith and Gwyn especially. And it was all great, and they built a nice giant kingdom, and it was all pretty and great and lovely. But the flame began to fade. And when the flame began to fade, so did the power of the lords. And so basically at this point, everyone started to panic.
What?
And they tried to do things that would extend the Age of Fire, because they were so. That was what good was.
Mm-hmm.
Good equals fire. Fire equals good. We can't have the fire going away.
No.
So they made a bunch of decisions that would effectively try to extend the Age of Fire, because what would happen after the Age of Fire ended is that the beings of Dark would come to be in power, much as the Age of Fire had in the first place. And that's basically where we start the game, with that knowledge.
Don't let the fire go out.
You don't really know that at the beginning. You come to realize you know that the flame is fading.
Who do you play as?
You play as whoever you want to be, more or less. It's not a named
It's not a
character.
particular person. It is a role that your character fills.
I see.
You are the chosen undead. So you enter the game in the Undead Asylum, which is this place far off to the north where they bring all of these accursed undead who effectively, they have this curse that prevents them from dying.
Mm-hmm.
They are not able to die, and they slowly just go insane over time without a strong sense of purpose or sufficient humanity to sustain them.
Or when they get tired of dying over and over.
Right. As reasonably one might.
Mm-hmm.
So you come in, and you're in a jail cell, and some dude is just in the skylight, kind of,
Hi.
hey,
Hey there. What you doing? You want this key?
you want this key to get out of your cell?
I got a nice little key here for you.
So you
That
get
took
the
a
key,
turn.
you get out, and you learn how to do Dark Souls on the
Go
floor.
whack some things.
Yes, I would like you.
Would you like a sword or an axe?
That's too bad. You gotta get a broken straight
Where did
sword.
this come from? See, when you said like in the skylight, I just imagined like a dude just like with his arms up, like pressed against the glass of the sky, like looking
No,
down.
I mean, it's not really skylight. It's more
Just
like
a
a hole in the ceiling.
Yeah, close enough.
Anyway,
Throw me the shoelace, please.
you waltz in there, there's a big scary demon that you can't beat, so you run away. And then you find your things that are good and cool, that make you whatever class you are, and then you go beat the big boss demon.
What are some of the classes you can choose from?
You could be... I mean, it's not important. We don't need to enumerate things, but...
There's just a lot.
It's just, you know,
You have
standard
choices.
fantasy game. You can have any manner of bludgeoning, slashing, or chopping weapons you desire.
Thief, knight, mage, cleric, pyromancer. There's just
The
whatever
standard
kind of weapons
RPG
you want
fare.
to.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever weapons you want to primarily use is what you pick.
Sure.
So after you do that, you go outside the asylum and get picked up by a giant raven and brought to the Firelink Shrine.
I don't know what that was. That was like a raven noise, but not.
No, it wasn't.
It might have been a crow. I can't really tell the difference.
It was crazy.
It was Edgar Allan Poe swooped down. Somebody's going to do a Dark Souls mod of that. Anyway, sorry. Sidetracked. But Raven picks you up.
So when you're in the Undead Asylum, you come across the guy who dropped the key into your cell, and he got hit by a boulder and he's dying.
That explains
And
something.
he gives you the juice that
Oh.
that heals you.
Drink some
And
of
he
this.
also says, he gives you your first bit of direction. And he says, "Thou who art undead art chosen, he who bringeth the bell of awakening shall know his destiny."
Oh.
And so that's all you really know about yourself at this
Cool.
point.
Bells
Bell. At this
Sweet.
point, you only know of one bell.
of one bell.
Uh-huh.
If you talk to the man in blue armor that you encounter right when you get into Firelink Shrine, he will tell you that there are, in fact, 2 bells of awakening.
One upward, one downward. Go.
One up above in the undead church, and the other far, far below at the ruins at the base of Blight Town. I've played this game too many times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine.
So you're, at this point, you are said, "Go ring bell."
Okay.
And you're like, "Okay." So you wander off in whatever direction you please, because that's the sort of game it is.
Uh-huh.
And you may or may not do some things. You may or may not fight certain bosses, but
Is it like a semi-open world sort of a
it's
thing?
not an open world
It's not-
whatsoever. But It is a very interconnected world.
It's interconnected, non-linear, but not open world.
Gotcha.
So you go around these various areas, beating various enemies, and once you have rung both of the bells, you go back to Firelink Shrine to figure out what your destiny is, because whatever.
And stuff.
And there's this giant freaking snake with ears looking thing hanging out of a place that used to be just a puddle of water, and you're like, hey, what in the heck is up with that? And then he says, oh, my name is Kingseeker Frampt. I am here to tell you your destiny, because you rang those bells.
Like, oh, that's what I did.
I'm really sorry. I should calm down.
What?
That's
Why?
what he says.
Oh, wait, that's
He
what
just
the
goes,
snake-
"Ah." And that's apparently excited noises for primordial serpents.
Oh,
Those
that-
are excitement noises.
absolute jubilation, I'm sure.
Yes, apparently. But, so he tells you that you must go to Enorlando and claim the Lord Vessel.
Oh,
And you're like, okay, that doesn't mean anything to me, but sure, why not? This is the only direction I've got, so what the heck?
After ringing the bells, there was a cutscene of a door opening, so you go to the door and you go through a whole place.
If you talk
and
to
that
the
brings you
snaky boy, he
Enorlando.
tells you that the Sen's fortress is the only way to Enorlando, and it's full of traps and bad. And
You
it is
don't
indeed
have
full
to
of
go
traps
that way.
and bad. So you go through Sen's fortress, you beat the Iron Golem, and then some lesser Batwing demons take you to Enorlando.
you have to fight through all the villagers to get to the Iron Golem, and then you beat the Iron Golem, and anyway,
No, it's
This
not
is-
Minecraft.
This is very not Minecraft.
I know.
After you get in Enorlando, you fight some more enemies, and you do some more things.
Mm-hmm.
And you come upon the boss, and you beat the boss, and you go up to Guinevere, who is the daughter of Gwyn. And she's like, oh, good, you've come. Here's the Lord Vessel.
Not the Holy Grail.
Not the Holy Grail. You get the Lord Vessel. You bring it back to Firelink Shrine, and you place it in the Firelink altar, which
And
is...
Frampt is all like, now go get the 4 boss souls and bring them here, and it'll open the way to the king.
These chumps have outlived their usefulness.
We
Just
don't
go
need
kill
them. Are these the lords?
Some of them are, some of them... 2 of them are lords.
Uh-huh.
You fight Nitu, who is one of the lords, and you fight the Witch of Izalith, who is another one of the lords.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Then
the other
Gwyn's
2 are
soul was split up between 2 other guys.
well, 5 other guys. If
oh,
you're
and a
being
burger and
technical.
fries.
Oh, okay.
The 4 kings
Oh, yes.
had one of the shards, and Seath the
But they're all
Scaleless,
one boss.
who we talked about earlier, also had one of the shards.
I see.
So you got to go and collect all their souls, and then that will be enough to satiate the Lord Vessel, and then you can succeed Gwyn, because that's what your destiny is. You got told that.
Oh,
Your destiny is to succeed Gwyn.
To link yourself to
You
the
don't know-
fire and
to-
keep the Age of Fire going.
Yes. Well, they tell you to link the fire. They don't tell you what linking the fire means.
hmm.
Right.
So you do that, you go beat all the bosses, and once you have all those, you go back to the Firelink altar and offer the souls to the Lord Vessel, and it opens it up. And there's this big giant kiln off in the distance that you see. And there's a whole bunch of ash in the way. So something clearly went on fire and burned out. So you have to fight your way up to that, and then the final boss is, surprise, surprise, Gwyn himself.
What?
Oh.
So you figure out that, linking the fire is perhaps not such a great thing, because it turned this once proud king into a husk of his former self.
Oh.
But you beat him, and if you're 99.9% of people, you link the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Including
Because
me.
you don't know anything different.
Because the game is designed in such a way that in your first run through, that's
You're kind of just doing
you're
what
given
they
the
tell you.
information.
Mm-hmm. The little they tell you.
The little they tell you,
Very
which is
little.
precious little. Like, if I could have summarized it in a sentence, I would have said, you ring the bells of awakening, go to Enorlando, you get the Lord Vessel, you beat the 4 great souls, and you fight Gwyn. That's literally the plot summarized.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of twisty turny
The
bosses
evident
on the way,
plot,
but-
I suppose.
But
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 wait, there's more.
da da da.
Had you done things in a slightly different order, you would have come upon a different primordial serpent
Oh.
named Darkstalker Koth.
Oh.
And Koth, if you fight the four kings before you place the Lord vessel, you would come upon him. At which point he tells you that basically the cake is a lie.
Oh.
Everything you have done so far is against your best interests. Linking the fire will continue the age of fire and not allow mankind, who is the progenitor of the furtive pygmy, so easily forgotten that we mentioned earlier.
Oh.
So
Forgot
you're
about
actually descendants
Like,
of
not a
this.
joke. I actually forgot about that guy.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's the
whole
point.
point.
What?
They
They
Is
spend
it
the whole
everything
game
ca-
not
is he-
talking about it.
Is he actually cake?
No.
That's like the whole thing nowadays.
That's the whole thing.
Even though those
Everything
videos have
is
been on the
cake.
internet for years at this point. Anyway.
Yeah. So he's like, yeah, the cake is a lie.
Oh.
So what you should really do is not. Don't link that fire. Just, walk away.
Mhm.
After you kill Gwyn, just get out of there.
Just get on that.
Get on out
Don't
of
do
there.
it.
So he basically tells you that the furtive pygmy sort of broke up. He got the fourth great soul that you don't really come across, but you do in a roundabout way,
Mm-hmm.
because he splintered up his soul and gave it to all of the other, kind of primordial creatures who didn't have a soul,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how humanity was born.
Oh.
So all humans are basically like, they have little fragments of the dark soul in them.
Oh.
Hence the name of the game, Dark Souls. Because the three other souls the other three great ones are kind of, they have their unique properties. Gwyn's is the soul of light. Nito's is the soul of death. The Witch of Izalith is the soul of life. So they all have these properties that kind of are opposite to each other, but yet sort of complementary in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But, the furtive pygmy was the only one who was, more or less selfless with his soul and allowed other beings to be able to have the same sort of sentience that he did. Because in the opening cutscene, when they're like just encountering the first flame, there's all of these beings that look like hollows.
Which are like the zombie guys that went crazy and lost their humanity and are undead. That sort of thing.
So
Are you one of those as the player?
you are
an
an
undead.
Okay.
You don't go hollow over the course of the game.
You
Other
go.
characters-
You can get to a pretty darn close to hollow point, and in fact, most people spend most of their game that way,
I
did.
see.
in a mostly hollow state. But you don't ever actually like go crazy in the game
Well, you could and just
and just give up.
give up. That's basically
When
going
you put the game down, that's effectively you going hollow.
That's pretty meta.
It is really
It
meta.
is.
This entire game is extremely meta.
And for its time especially, it's...
It was only
2010?
2011.
No, but I mean, like, other games probably weren't thinking on that level
no, I'm
in
sure
terms
they
of game
weren't.
design.
particularly large AAA games.
Yeah, so that's what made it stand out at the time, I suppose.
Yeah,
Also, it's hard as spheroids,
Right.
it is hard as spheroids.
so that made it stand out.
But anyway, in the DLC, you encounter a couple of people who've been name dropped throughout other things. The Knight Artorias. So effectively, you go back in time to rescue this princess from a distant land, but the land isn't really so distant. That's like the primary premise. But there's this knight who is one of Gwyn's most trusted knights. His name is Artorias, who is sent to go kind of stop the abyss in Ulasil, which is this ancient city. And he failed. And he failed pretty miserably. And he was effectively corrupted by the abyss and turned into a dark being. Because he didn't have any darkness within him, he couldn't withstand it. That's what the Elizabeth mushroom tells you.
The what?
The Elizabeth the mushroom.
Oh.
There are Elizabeth
What?
mushrooms. There is in real life, there's Elizabeth mushrooms. Like, that's a
Ah.
variety of mushroom.
But Elizabeth the mushroom.
Yes, Elizabeth
Mhm.
the mushroom. Who gives you Elizabeth mushrooms?
Hmm.
Because they're a useful item. But anyway, Elizabeth the mushroom tells you that Artorias had no dark in him and therefore succumbed to it. So you effectively gotta stop the abyss in his place. So you go and you
Become
kill-
the Hollow Knight.
You don't become Hollow Knight.
You are a knight. You do kind of go hollow, but this is a different game.
Apparently.
Apparently. On the surface, anyway.
Yeah.
You go and you kind of work your way down into Ulasil to figure out where the abyss is coming from, and then you find the primordial abyss, as it were. And there's these kind of black sprites kind of wavering around, and they look awful lot like the humanities that you carry around, which leads you to believe that these are kind of the soul fragments of primordial humans, or what could make humans. They weren't like occupying a body yet, so they're just kind of shards of the dark soul. And eventually you get down to Manus, the father of the abyss, who most people speculate is the furtive pygmy. He's this big, scary abyss dude, and he's extremely hard. But you beat him, and you rescue the princess, and hooray. That's kind of it. That's the story. In much more detail than it really needed to be, but
Or that the game would tell you.
More detail than the game.
The game would tell you outright.
Yeah.
So,
Hopefully
Cool
you learned
thing.
something.
So, cool things.
Nathan, I would like to get your thoughts as a first-time player having finished the game relatively recently.
As a first-time player having finished the game relatively recently, what are the cool things about the game that I liked? Well, for one thing, I rather enjoyed the challenge and the kind of challenge it provided. It is notorious for being a hard game, but it's not always
Blatantly
dumb,
unfair.
cheap. It is always very fair, right? It's the sort of thing where when you're fighting a boss, and after you've died initially, figuring out what the heck it even does, every time afterwards, I feel like every time I died, it was because I did something wrong or I was missing something. Usually, the bosses weren't such that I felt like they were poorly designed and were being dumb. And so I felt a great satisfaction when I could put together a plan that kind of works one time, and then I iterate, and it almost works another time, then I iterate again, and I finally win by one shred of health, and it's like, yes! I like that sense of accomplishment and the satisfaction of one part puzzle solving, one part execution.
Yeah.
And take that kind of boss fight idea and extrapolate it to pretty much the whole map. You're exploring this large, mysterious, interconnected world that loops back onto itself, and every time you find a shortcut, you're like, aha, I know where this is. You're tiptoeing forward little by little to make sure you don't run into every enemy, but later in the game when you backtrack to that area, you just blast through there because A, you're higher level and have better gear, and B, you just know the layout and where everybody is.
And you can just kind of run past everyone.
Yeah, because
Or just smack them.
Yeah.
So I liked the progression in that way. Of course,
It's very iterable and very discoverable. You can come at it with work over it and analyze your mistakes and come up with a better solution, understand the tells of different enemies' attacks, and be able to avoid them consistently. And it's always the same. If you stimulate the right conditions, the outcome will be the same every time.
right. It doesn't feel random or arbitrary. And also, even when you're going into new places and you've never experienced it, as long as you are good at the controls and know what you're doing there, and kind of are in the right mindset of expecting the unexpected, you can get quite a ways without before you die, of course, and you will die quite a bit.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the meta of the game, right? You just die and try again.
Also, I rather liked the way they implemented the leveling up system. Some games, when you level up your items or your stuff, it can feel kind of arbitrary when you cross the various thresholds and then what they choose to level up if they don't let you choose. But I like how in this game you defeat the enemies and you collect their souls. They're like soul points. And you use those when you level up or when you buy your gear. So you have this one resource that you collect that really applies to everything, and it's up to you to choose how and where you spend them. And I like that amount of control and that amount of strategy I can put into my character. But also it's a great amount of risk, because if you've just got a metric crap ton of souls on you waiting to get to the next bonfire, and you die, you lose them in like a little puddle of blood and glowiness.
Yep.
And then you have to travel back to that area and get it again. And if you died there, well, that means there's something there that killed you.
Yeah.
So most of the time, you got to rush, grab it, and then hope you don't die with
just
the
yoink it.
big monster.
Yep.
So gameplay-wise, I very much enjoyed it.
Snake people on ladders.
Snake people on ladders, yes.
They'll just bap you in the head. That's just other things that can climb ladders.
After
Or have interesting interactions.
Yeah.
You just kind of punch each other and they'll kick you if you're above them. Just kind of get in a wet noodle fight where you do 3 damage to each other until someone falls off.
Uh-huh.
Probably you.
Yeah, probably you.
So yeah, I enjoyed the exploration and gameplay. Also, visually, it was pretty great. I was playing the original on 360 on his whatever. There was a remastered version that apparently looks and runs better, but even for a 2011 game, it holds up really well. It's got a nice art style.
That's
It's
kind of
got
the forefront.
a nice use of color. It is a very overall dark color palette game.
Naturally.
But it is quite diverse,
It is-
nonetheless.
It is. Every area is distinct, and you can tell when you roll over into a new area. Each area has its own like color palette, and some of them are really great. The forest, the Darkroot Forest,
Darker Garden, yep.
Darkroot Garden is really kind of lovely.
It's even lovelier in remastered.
I bet. And then and Orlando is just kind of brilliant with the architecture
Until you
and the light.
figure out that cake is a lie, too.
Oh.
Yeah, and that was something you told me. It's like, oh, if I had attacked Giant Lady, everything would go dark because she's an illusion just to keep me on my false quest. Wow,
Oh.
that's neat.
Yes, the lady you get the Lord Vessel from is an illusion. The real one ran away a long time ago when she figured out that the kingdom was going to crap.
She bailed.
She bailed, and
Huh.
There's actually
Gwyn's son, Gwendolyn, sort of took over keeping people on the quest in Orlando.
it's a trap.
Is she the...
He's a trap.
Oh.
Well, he was sort
the,
of...
The illusion person?
No, the illusion person is a lady. But
Emma? No?
no, not
Okay.
Emma.
Anyway.
Are you trying to say that Emma is an illusion?
No. Well, I
For all we know.
She could be at this point. No.
I mean, we have to kill her and find out.
mean, but not actually. Don't
All
worry.
you have to do is,
If you-
like, hit her at all. Like, you
No.
you
like,
can do
just-
literally 1 damage to Guinevere and she disappears.
Oh.
So all we
That-
need to do is deal 1 damage to Emma and we'll know.
So instead of going, we just poke.
Yeah.
Just poke.
And she
But
like...
that's actually kind of another thing you touched on. That this game has a lot of lore that is very indirectly told. And I think it's neat that after my first playthrough, I only scratched the surface. I missed an entire area because I didn't whack the right tree.
It is... That Ash Lake is so hard to find, though. Like, if you weren't really, really, really scrutinizing it, you would never find it.
Okay.
How did people find it?
People really, really scrutinize it.
It's a scrutinizable game, I tell you what.
There's a quest line that leads you down there.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
That
The Onion
helps.
Knight guy.
Oh, yeah. And that turns out really sad from what I've looked up on
It does, in
Laughing
fact,
Video's
turn out-
video.
That is the words that describe Dark Souls. That one turns out really sad.
It's like, how was I supposed to know that the giant, half-naked, half-spider woman was actually a really nice big sister that fed her diseased, blind younger sister humanity so that they could raise their egg kids?
So that she literally didn't die. Like, she was on life support, basically. And
It's-
her older sister was defeating
And
heroes that came along just to keep her sister alive.
And had I warned the
tough
right
life.
wing when I talked to her, she'd have told me that and mistook me for her sister, and then made me feel all bad for killing her because I wanted to ring a stupid bell and sustain the fire. It's
Don't you
this
feel
whole
like
thing.
garbage?
It's just full of things like that
What is it with video games making me feel bad about killing things?
totally subverting.
right?
I don't know. It's,
Even if they're the biggest, meanest, ugliest things, like a giant lava monster that's apparently also their brother, that's also really sad about one of their sisters
like
dying,
the
but she
lava
didn't
monster
die. She
actually
ran away
has
and
a
taught me
special-
pyromancy. It's,
Yeah, it's
and I
like
just whacked his knuckles until he died.
the lava monster has a special needs kid that, and it is working 2 jobs overtime to pay for the medical bills. And like, don't you feel great about yourself?
Man. So it's like, I played the game, and I was clueless to like 99% of everything that was going on.
Aren't you a heartless killer?
And also, there's lots of things that if you don't do them in the right order, you'll never really experience that quest line,
Uh-huh.
or not in its fullest.
Right.
There was more to that one lady and her 2 paladin knights that got kicked into a hole.
there sure was.
There was
Like you
also
do.
a lot more to Mr. Onion Guy and his daughter that I didn't experience. There was a whole lot more to... There's a whole lot more.
There's a whole lot more.
It is worth replaying, and I'm very interested to replay it at some point, particularly on a platform that has the DLC.
Does 360 not?
It
does, but they didn't
I
buy it.
attempted to, but it's weird because it's running on an Xbox One and it's emulated. So how that works is really weird.
I think I'm
Anyway.
either just going to get a hold of Remastered somehow or play my brother's Steam Prepare to Die edition when I get around to it.
Oh, Andrew's played it?
Andrew hasn't played it, he just has it.
Oh,
That is
a
the
darn
nature
shame.
of Steam.
That is the nature of Steam.
yeah. I don't know when
So-
I'm ever going to play Left 4 Dead.
It's
because
not
it's a
really a game
multiplayer
you
game.
play for a story. It's a game
No.
you screw around killing zombies with your friends.
Right, yeah. So someday we'll get around to that.
So you need friends that have it also.
yeah,
But anyway, Dark Souls.
Dark Souls.
that.
So what's up with this curse? What's up with this thing that makes us unable to die and respawn at the bonfires all the time? And
Solaire made me sad.
And Solaire made you sad too. Literally every NPC has the potential to make you sad if you don't do things that...
Looks like we're forgotten again.
And even the Lord of Dark ending isn't really the good ending per
No,
se.
and that's the thing.
Is there a good ending?
No.
There is no good ending. That's what you're supposed to come to.
The kind of whole point of the game is you have a whole bunch
You
of
suck.
choices.
Everything you
Everything
do
sucks.
sucks.
Every choice you're presented with is a bad choice, and but you can't just not choose because that's also a bad choice.
Vanity of vanities. Everything is vanity.
So you've got to kill somebody to make sure somebody else doesn't die, but the other person that doesn't
kill
die might go hollow
somebody.
anyway, and then you have to kill them when they're undead. It's just a bunch of sad stuff,
Too sad
and it's
for me.
really well done.
What's up with curses?
Like, man.
That was more going for the Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh.
What's up with
deal with curses? Anyway,
Well,
One might conclude that from the fact that you are essentially a creature who is in nature dark, the fact that you respawn at a bonfire, which is a fire, might seem a little odd to you. And there's this thing called the dark sign, which is basically what brands one as an undead. And
it's
it-
the thing that teleports you to the bonfire when you die and makes you drop all your stuff.
Yes.
I
And so
see.
that's sort of like the brand that represents the curse. And it's fiery. It appears as a ring of fire.
Do 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 do.
Guy Fieri.
Do,
Do do do.
Anyway, so for one who has been paying attention thus far, that might raise a few alarm bells.
Or if you're just listening to the podcast and zoned out, like, wait, what just happened? We're calling
Reference
you out.
Johnny Cash? What?
Consider yourself called out. Listen, pay attention. Give
All
us.
both of yous.
Yeah.
So
I expect
it's
more from the
it's
two of you.
been most of what I'm about to say from the rest of the podcast on a lore perspective is mostly speculation, but it's very solid speculation and from people who spend their entire lives making YouTube videos about this, so they
Rip.
probably know what they're talking about.
Rip.
I mean, if you have 2 million subscribers just making Dark Souls videos, you're probably doing pretty well for
Yeah,
yourself.
fair enough.
Anyway, so it's mostly speculated that the Curse of the Undead was something put in place by Gwyn to sort of tether the undead to his bonfires, which are linked to the first flame. They're kind of the representatives around the world for the first flame,
Gotcha.
as it were. So you would notice that when you level up, you feed souls to, when you sit down at a bonfire, you can level up by spending souls there. And it stands to reason that you're feeding these souls to the fire to keep it going. And likewise, when you want to unhollow yourself, if you want to become human again, you have to offer a humanity sprite to the fire. And to kindle it, which gives you more healing juice, you also have to offer humanity, which, as we know, is a shard of the Dark Soul, which is a very powerful soul. So effectively what Gwyn has done is chained the undead to the bonfires to feed his Age of Fire.
Oh.
So you're kind of being farmed, essentially.
The Matrix.
Yeah,
You're a battery.
kind of.
And if you look closely at the bonfires themselves, there are swords sticking out of a bunch of bones.
There's really not much wood in there or anything.
Oh.
It's just sword, bones, ash.
Ash.
The sword and the bones.
You don't pull it out, though.
No.
So that
Not like you
further
do anything if you
proves
did.
the point that you're essentially feeding humankind to the fire to keep it going.
So another thing for you to feel awful about.
Another thing for you to feel awful about. All of these creatures that you're killing over and over again, you're just helping the Age of Fire perpetuate. But you don't really realize, like, on a first playthrough, but
I didn't.
the Age of Fire isn't such an inherently bad thing.
Mm.
The lords were really, really terrible people. And if they weren't so terrible, the Age of Fire probably wouldn't have been so bad. But they decided to be real dumb and selfish, and that's what caused the world to be in a terrible state. If they hadn't, and they had just let the fire fade, it would have gone to an Age of Dark, and, eventually we would probably be pretty sure that the fire would come back again. Because when the fire shrinks down to embers, you can always reignite it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the premise of Dark Souls 2. It exists to tell you that the cycle just perpetuates. From all time, the fire will fade, the dark will rise, and eventually someone will come along and relink the fire and start the Age of Fire again.
Uh-huh.
And throughout history, that will just repeat and over and over and over and over and over again. So that's kind of where Dark Souls 2 fits into the picture.
So it is kind of like the Matrix.
It is kind of like the Matrix.
Huh. That's a
There's much
connection.
more about the story of Dark Souls 2, but that merits its own episode.
Yeah, probably.
Let's see, what else is there? Yeah, and by contrast, the Age of Dark has pretty clear repercussions to it. When you go into the Abyss in the DLC, you encounter these, human sprites, and when you run into them, they damage you. Like, they don't even swing at you, they don't attack you, just coming into contact with them harms you.
Huh.
And so, when the world is shrouded in darkness, it's not necessarily the case that humanity will thrive. In fact, when the world is full of dark, it's kind of not so good.
Uh-huh.
So you are left wondering, well, what really is the best state for us? What is the Age of Fire right? Is the Age of Dark right? You don't really know. But it's clear that neither are especially good in and of themselves. There's no clear favorite.
Hmm.
And no
Nuance.
game takes place in an Age of Dark. None of the Dark Souls games occur in an Age of Dark. And we know that they happen. In Dark Souls 2, it's pretty much confirmed that it just goes back and forth all the time.
Gotcha. Cyclically.
Yes. It's
Mhm.
kind of an Eastern way of understanding mythologies.
Sure, light and
It's-
dark.
and cyclic nature, too.
Yeah.
Western mythologies kind of have a linear progression to them, where events just progress in a linear fashion,
Uh-huh.
whereas in Eastern mythologies, and the game was developed in Japan, so it's kind of influenced by that sort of
I see.
thinking. It's much more of a cyclic thing. So,
Gotcha. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I could go on for hours and hours about all of the different individual characters' storylines and how
There's
tragic
so many
they are.
different individual characters' storylines.
And that you don't even really find out enough about them unless you take the time to talk to them.
Talk to them over and over.
You like
Then
have
you
to
get their
like,
equipment and read their equipment's descriptions and your weapons descriptions.
Yeah. That's another thing about Dark Souls is that it tells stories through item descriptions. Like,
huh.
so few other things do that, where
Yeah.
it tells you about events that happened and how this person came upon this item, and it tells you about the lands from which they came. Like, the sorceries will tell you, in such and such place in Vinheim, which is the magic land.
It's got sort of like a Lord of the Rings thing to it, where like the swords have stories behind them that they use,
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
little things like that.
And all of these rings and...
They're not just objects for utility; they also bear with them significance.
There's like historical characters that developed these spells and miracles and pyromancies. that
And
are-
you encounter some of them.
yeah.
It adds depth, and I suppose makes the world feel more lived in
Yes.
after a fashion,
Yes.
in as much as they can live in an undead world.
Well, not everyone's undead.
Oh, okay.
That's why you come to Lordran in the first place, is if you're undead and you want to find out your destiny. In all these surrounding countries, there are still people who aren't.
Oh,
Not
I think-
everyone is an undead.
Onion Guy isn't undead at the beginning of the game, is he?
There's a few people that aren't undead at the beginning,
Okay.
but most of the people you run across are. It's because why else would you be in Lordran? There's no real reason to come there if you aren't.
makes
In
sense.
fact, it's the only place to go if you're undead.
Right.
Well,
That's Dark Souls.
yeah. What
In-
have we as Catholics to glean from Dark Souls?
Truth. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
Life sucks.
Yeah.
Well and truly
Ecclesiastes comes to
will
mind.
never let you off easy, and it's going to be awful sometimes.
There's never a
and-
perfect solution.
Well,
Well, not
there's
never, but
you're going to constantly counter adversity,
yep.
and what you do in response to that is what is important.
Yeah.
And you will always be given an opportunity to get back up. Every time you fall, you will return and have a chance to come back at it again.
Don't
You
believe
may,
it.
you may
Simply
feel like
everything
you're
told.
beating your head against the same brick wall over and over and over again, and you just can't dodge that attack. I mean, but
Yep. In
But-
life struggles, that's how it be.
You know that it can be done.
right.
It is
Yeah.
certain that it is possible. You just have to put yourself in a position to make it happen.
Yep.
And also, you can rely on others to help you out.
Yes, the online feature that I didn't do.
Yes. Well, you couldn't do on that.
At this point.
Well, no, it's
No,
like
no.
you need to buy Xbox Live to
Oh,
online.
yeah.
on PC. You don't. But
Because internet.
so you can even some of the NPCs you can summon to help you out on boss fights. So a character can kind of put down a little thing on the ground that says, "Hey, I can come help you."
Uh-huh.
And a lot of the NPCs will be near bosses that they can help you out. It's pretty neat.
So yeah, get help when you need it.
Get help when you need it.
Yeah.
If you
But
get
also
good, you can solo.
Personal responsibility.
There
and
will also be
reliance upon
people
good
who
friends.
invade your life just to mess you up and be mean.
Yeah, there are some NPCs that will be just mean to you. But those aren't the ones. If you decide to spare their lives, they might sell you things.
Uh,
I don't. I have never
Life-
spared his
so
life.
you could say this game can be summed up as life is pain, Highness. Anyone who tells you differently is selling you something.
That's right.
I guess any other elements of truth, or should we go on to what goodness there might be in a dark, dark world?
Don't always believe your first impression of something,
Apparently.
Yes.
because it turns out that your first impression was horribly, horribly, horribly wrong,
Mm-hmm.
It's
and
actually
not representative of the truth whatsoever.
Yeah.
that's something I also really liked about that game, because right after beating it, I was like half inclined to start over and try doing something a little different. Start with a different class, do things in a different order. And if you do that enough, you would have come across the other information at some point.
Over enough iterations.
So yeah, but make sure you find all that information.
And also, don't believe the second thing you hear. Because the second thing is in opposition to the first thing. And you have to analyze both critically.
Yeah. Critical thinking.
And you start off doing one thing, and then you pendulum swing the other way, and neither of them are really good. You got to find the balance in the middle. Virtue is the middle of extremes.
Exactly. Bet you didn't think a game like Dark Souls would be so...
Dark Souls is a very virtue-building experience.
Oh, yes.
I didn't swear. Not much, anyway.
Can only imagine James trying to play.
I swore playing Wind Waker. That was the game that was, no joke, the game that broke me. I would be like, oh, shoot, crap, no, dang it, no.
That wasn't my experience watching you play Bioshock, but...
Well, you saw me play Luigi's Mansion.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, it was Wind Waker that broke me. Anyway.
Goodness. There's lots of relationships that you make with some of the characters. And, like, you have the opportunity to save everyone from hollowing. If you don't, they will all go hollow. Everyone you ever come across will end up as a broken husk of their former selves.
Goodness.
Well, I don't think you can save everyone.
Yeah,
I think the Crestfallen you can't save. But you can save the vast majority of the kind of vendor NPCs you come across.
Yeah.
I see.
So if you have forethought, you can help people along their journeys and continue to help them find purpose in their lives so they don't give up.
Makes sense. Beauty.
As previously stated, the diversity of areas and aesthetics that Dark Souls presents is pretty unparalleled in games that I've ever played.
Well, and like how interconnected and...
Yes, and that's another thing that
that's probably more of a Unity
I just
thing.
go, when there's a shortcut that brings me back to a place where it's just like, it's just so brilliant the way this world is all put together.
And then every like individual ancient city you go to has like completely different architecture and a whole culture kind of feel to it with everything. And so good.
I wanna yell. But yeah, I suppose the well, and then you guys mentioned too how they managed to have a lot of diversity in like use of color, despite it being kind of a darker color palette. They still managed to make good use of that.
Lost Izalith is one of my favorite areas in the game,
which is kind of rare for a game of that era, at least a 3D game.
It's very lava-y for the vast majority of it. And especially in remastered, it just glows and it's so nice. I just like turn my camera up and look at the ceiling, and just like look at all the lava dripping around and all of the like rocks and crystals and stuff there. I'm like, this is so freaking cool.
Another thing about the diversity of each area is there was a large diversity of enemies also, and some enemies only get used in a couple areas for a couple little scenarios. But they're like designed with the rest of the area in mind, so they're very aesthetically fitting. Sure. And they're all really cool designs or creepy designs or. So I think that was another thing I appreciated. They did reuse a lot of the more standard enemies, your standard hollow skeletal guys and stuff, but
skeletal.
They aren't skeletons, but they are very skeletal. There are skeletons, and they're a nightmare.
Yeah, well, we're not going to spoil the way to make them not a nightmare for you.
Yeah, you figure that out on your
There's
own.
these roly skeletons, too, that are the absolute worst.
Bring out the Droidicas.
I hate the Droidicus skeletons, I tell you what. They grind through your shield. But like, they only show up in like 2 areas, and they're a really unique enemy, and it's kind of neat the diversity they have.
But they're also such a pain where they appear.
because they're like long corridor areas, or like they come out of the
Or the
dark.
painted world where it's just like there's one every column in the room, and,
and
there's
it's
just
like dark, and you
6.
can't see them.
You can't
they can
see
see
it.
you.
You can see one of them through a skylight in the way back, but you wouldn't have known that there were 5 others in the path to get there.
Oh goodness.
But yeah, that kind of a tangent from the beauty point, but I just really appreciated the enemy and diversity that fit with every area.
Yes, it's
How's the
very
combat?
It's so diverse almost that it in some way defies reason. Like, how on earth do you go from a lush garden to a lava pit in, like, you go down one elevator?
Take the bathysphere and you're in a different place.
Yeah, pretty much.
Unity then. There's a lot. It sounds like there's not really everything serves a purpose for the greater game,
Yes.
to the larger whole, as it were.
It is united in its desire to remind you that everything sucks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like even like the little things like the game mechanics have an in-world explanation.
Yeah,
like the dying and respawn loop is like an actual part of like
It's literally a fundamental piece of the lore.
yeah.
The
Mhm.
gameplay loops. It's just so brilliantly constructed. in
and,
that
and
way.
every item fits into the world with its little descriptions and all that stuff,
Uh-huh.
and very cohesively designed too.
Mhm.
It's just the world, the level, it layout, everything feels really intentionally placed to serve the greater experience that is Dark Souls.
Neat. Imagine if our podcasts were that meta.
How so?
Like I don't know. Like what are
I
some...
don't think we're capable of being that meta.
No,
I
but
think
I
the,
don't
whole,
think
the
we
whole
were.
point that
Our format doesn't lend itself to
the
that.
reason we
No.
exist is to make plain obscurity in video
Yeah,
games and various
true.
forms of media. So
That's
that's sort of
true.
counterintuitive to why we exist.
Yeah, that's true.
And Plato would not have it.
Actually, how do they know that? Actually, this whole time they need to be listening to the podcast backwards, and we have completely hidden messages. We don't.
Don't,
But-
please.
Well,
That's
no-
something to add to the wiki.
Yeah. Hey, full circle. Well, thank you for listening to another episode, the one where we actually talk about Dark Souls, the first game. I mean, there's going to be other Dark Souls games yet to cover.
We'll get around to those after a while.
Yep.
Give us
Which we'll
something to
probably talk
finish
about
them.
in the prologue.
Maybe we'll get you to play some of one in the meantime.
We'll see what I have time for anymore. It's kind of sad, but in a good way. Like I'm glad I have money and no time. Wait.
Time is money.
Anyway,
Thanks for listening.
thanks for listening. We'll
All
catch
2
you.
of you.
All two
both
of you.
of yous.
You're the best pair. As far as we're concerned. Well, anyway.
Yes.
We will talk to you again with another episode next week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, we don't have Instagram, but email us at palladiumpapist@gmail.com.
Questions, comments, concerns, complaints.
Yeah, all that fun stuff. Follow us on the social medias. Share our podcast with somebody you think would enjoy it, or somebody who needs to listen to it regardless. Yeah, we will catch you later. Bye.
Bye.
Peace.